Are you tired of watching all the other fantasy football channels out there and they just don't cover the players that are on your roster? I got you covered. We're going to break down all the games here in Week 6, talk all the lead running backs and who we should start and sit here for Week 6. What is going on, everybody? Jake, Fantasy Headliners. Hopefully everybody's doing well out there in YouTube land. Hopefully everybody had a pretty successful Week 5. Yep, I know there's a few times there throughout the week kind of just makes you scratch your head. Things don't really go according to plan. I get it. I'm right there with you. Biggest news here for the running back portion of the week, the J.J. injury. We covered it in our weekly waiver wire show, and I'm going to cover it again here this week in this show. I'm going to break down every game for you guys. I know you guys hear a lot of people down in the comment section saying they really appreciate how I touch on every running back every week. I'm not going to have you guys sit through a 15, 20-minute video and not even talk about a player you own. I'm going to make sure I get to each and every one of them, give you a quick bit of information, my perspective on them, whether they should be a start or sit for the week. Try to help everybody out and help as many people out as possible. Before I get into this list, and I'm going to get into it quickly, make sure you guys head over to RotoBaller after this show. Check out their YouTube page. Lots of great content coming up this week. And the Sunday live shows have been an absolute hit. We have the last-minute weather updates, injury updates, start-sit advice, roster advice, answering your questions live right there on the air. Yeah, that's something you don't want to miss out on. So after this show is over, head over there, check it out, hit the subscribe button also. And as I get into this list, make sure you hit the subscribe button here. Really appreciate the support. Now let's talk some running backs here for Week 6. All right, here we go. Thursday Night Football, Philadelphia Eagles at the New York Football Giants, and we'll start off on the Philadelphia side of the football. That's where I started the waiver wire show. Might as well start this show there also. It's the biggest story of the week. J.J., torn ACL, done for the year. What do we do going forward in Philadelphia? Now, if you've watched my waiver wire show, and hopefully you have, you know that as of right now, I'm a little bit higher on Wendell Smallwood. He's the better pass catcher of the two, and as of right now, seems to be the leader to get the goal line carries. He's a little bit harder of a runner than Corey Clement. Now, Corey Clement may see more volume as the game goes along, but the touches that Wendell Smallwood gets here over the next few weeks, especially while Darren Sproles is out, may be more productive for you. Like I said, he's going to get the pass catching volume, so if you're in a PPR league, Wendell Smallwood's going to have more value there also. Now, they do have a pretty decent matchup against the Giants this week. They have been allowing 26.6 points to opposing running backs, which is, a great opportunity for these guys to score some points. Now, are either one of these guys going to go out there and get huge volume and huge numbers? I'm not expecting it here for the first week. We kind of need to see how it plays out a little bit. But both of these guys, no matter which one you have, if you have either of them, I'm fine with either of them as a flex start only this week. There is that potential that it's just a full-blown committee. The offense in Philadelphia isn't quite clicking like it was last year. They're not exactly having a whole lot of second-half leads. That defense has been giving up a lot of points, allowing them to have to throw the ball more all throughout the game. Another reason why I like Wendell Smallwood. Hopefully, if the Giants can put some things together, score some points, this game could be going back and forth, be pretty exciting to watch, and hopefully we can get some points out of these guys. But as of right now, like I said, either one of them, flex play only at best for me this week. All right, on the Giants side of the football, you got Saquon Barkley, and more than likely, if you got him, you're starting him, and I don't blame you. He's got a lot more value in PPR leagues, obviously, though, and I'm starting to get a little bit worried about his rushing production. The last 2 weeks, he's had 44 yards and 48 yards on the ground. It's not ideal, I get it, but he's so involved in the passing game that you basically have to start him. The issue with this is the Philadelphia Eagles only give up 13 points a game to opposing running backs. That's good enough for number 2 defense in fantasy football as far as points against for running backs. And if the Eagles can do anything well so far this year, it is stop the run. They haven't allowed more than 55 yards on the ground in a game yet to opposing running backs. They are an elite run defense in Philadelphia. I expect a little bit more of the same from Saquon Barkley this week. Are you going to go out there and get a huge 100-yard game? He's going to be big play dependent on that, but he's going to be involved in the passing game. And as long as you're in a PPR league, he should get you another solid game. Obviously, you're going to start Saquon Barkley almost every single week. Let's just hope that here eventually these rushing numbers start to head back towards the normal area where we were expecting him to be, somewhere in the 80 to 100 yards per game. But as of right now, he just looks totally home run dependent if you're in a standard league, and he's probably a little frustrating to you at this point. On to Sunday, you got the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Atlanta Falcons. We'll start off with the Bucs, and typically this would be a great matchup for the running backs in this game. Atlanta is the 30th ranked defense against the run. They're allowing, on average, 32.8 points per game to opposing running backs. They've allowed multiple scores in 3 weeks this season so far. Typically, this is the type of game you want to start your running backs against. However, The running backs in this game are Peyton Barber and Ronald Jones, who both make me want to throw up in my mouth. Neither one of these guys are appealing. This is a pass-first offense. I don't care if there's people out there advocating for Ronald Jones and his 2.9 yards per carry. This is not a run-first team. At some point, yes, somebody's going to have a good game in this offense, but I'm not willing to risk it this week. I don't care how good the matchup is. I want nothing to do with Peyton Barber or Ronald Jones. On the Atlanta side of the football, I would like to say we have ourselves an Ito bit of a problem. And I'm talking about Ito Smith, because all of a sudden now he's stealing goal line carries. If it wasn't bad enough, the injury to Devontae Freeman, lost a lot of people a few weeks of production. All the Tevin Coleman owners were excited because they thought they were going to get RB1 production from Tevin Coleman. Well, that didn't happen either. Now Freeman is back, seems to be somewhat healthy, and Ito Smith is stealing goal line carries. This is already a full-blown committee, as is in Atlanta. We already knew there was close to a 60-40, 50-50 split between Freeman and Coleman, but now if you take the touchdowns and split them between those two and Ito Smith, you have even more of a headache. Typically, this is a matchup you would want to start the Falcons running backs against. Tampa Bay does not have a solid defense, and Atlanta's defense is so bad, they're going to have to throw because they're going to be giving up points. However, with this unknown in the backfield of the Atlanta Falcons, I'm going to sit all three of these guys this week until somebody can establish this actual lead role. Now, I do expect that to be Devontae Freeman eventually, but until we know he's 100% healthy and getting his full workload, hopefully somewhere near the 15 touch range, I'm not touching any of these guys. It's too risky, and whoever gets the touchdown is going to have the better day. And now that we have to worry about Ito Smith in this backfield also, I'm not chancing it. Panthers at Redskins are next, so Christian McCaffrey, first one up here on the sheet. And I was starting to get a little worried there. Week 3 against Cincinnati, the guy came out and had 2 receptions for 10 yards. The week before that, he had 14 for 102. Didn't really understand what was going on, why he wasn't being used in the passing game. This past week against the Giants, he had 5 receptions, 35 yards, and a touchdown to go along with another 17 carries. Now, he didn't put up huge numbers on the ground, only 58 yards, no touchdowns on the ground. But I'd like to see that he was slowly getting more involved in that passing game. This is where Christian McCaffrey lives. He needs that passing volume to get you that fringe RB1 talent every single week. If he loses that passing volume and he's solely reliant on running the ball, it's going to be a roller coaster ride for Christian McCaffrey. They do get the Washington Redskins this week, who didn't give up a whole lot of yardage this past week to the New Orleans Saints, mostly because the Saints were throwing it all over them, and they really didn't have to rely on the run. Did have a couple scores on the ground from Mark Ingram, and that, to be honest, really doesn't affect Christian McCaffrey very much as long as they involve him in the passing game, which I expect them to do going forward. This is going to be something where Christian McCaffrey is a must-start every single week, especially in PPR leagues, and regardless of the matchup, a good run defense, whatever it is, he has value regardless, just due to that ability that he can just go out there and catch 10 balls a week and not have to rely on getting 20 carries like a lot of running backs. You're starting Christian McCaffrey this week against the Redskins. For the Redskins, we have a couple guys who are a little banged up right now. You have AP, Adrian Peterson, dealing with a dislocated shoulder that he apparently popped back into place, but wasn't really needed on Monday night because they were having the doors blown off them by the New Orleans Saints and Drew Brees. The more concerning injury to me, though, is Chris Thompson, coming with a rib injury out of that game. Still unclear as to how serious, how limited he'll be, if he'll miss time going forward. Listen, if you have Chris Thompson, the matchups really don't matter. In a PPR league, you're probably going to start Chris Thompson every week as a solid flex play just for his pass-catching ability alone. This week, they get the Carolina Panthers, who are the 13th ranked defense against opposing running backs. But Chris Thompson is kind of somewhat matchup proof. He doesn't really fall into that category of opposing run defenses because he can beat you in so many different ways. Until more news comes out about Chris Thompson, he's going to be a sit for me this week. If he's practicing fully by the end of the week, though, I have no issues throwing him back in as a flex play. However, Adrian Peterson this week against the Carolina Panthers, I'm going to sit. I'm not gonna test it this week. I need to see him practice fully and have a good game. He was in a walking boot during the bye week. Now he's got a shoulder injury. He's not the youngest guy in the NFL anymore. And until I see him at full speed, full strength, I'm not going to start Adrian Peterson either. Colts and Jets are next, so we'll start off on the Colts side of the football. We'll be talking about Jordan Wilkins and Nyheim Hines. Even though we really don't need to talk about Jordan Wilkins because I really have no interest in starting him at this point. Nyheim Hines is the back to own in this backfield going forward for the foreseeable future in Indianapolis. Last week against the New England Patriots, he had 15 carries for 45 yards. Not great, but I like the volume that he saw on the ground. He also added another 7 receptions for 45 yards, 15 PPR points, no touchdowns, which actually, capped him from having a really, really good fantasy football day. But going forward, he's another one of these guys, similar like I said with Chris Thompson. You can't take into account the matchup that he has coming forward. He's kind of somewhat matchup proof because he can go on the ground, through the air, line up in the slot, be put in motion. So many different ways for them to use Nyheim Hines, and they throw the ball a ton in Indianapolis. They're the highest passing volume as far as pass attempts go in the league, and Nyheim Hines is somebody who's going to get a lot of targets. We still don't know the status of T.Y. Hilton. If he misses, that only boosts the value of Nyheim Hines more. Yes, they're playing the Jets, who are the 18th ranked run defense against opposing running backs, giving up 23.6 points per game. But to me, that doesn't really matter. He's going to see the volume, and I'm going to start Nyheim Hines this week. Marlon Mack is waiting in the wings, but he just can't stay healthy. Doesn't matter if he comes back or not. Nyheim Hines is who I'm starting this week for the Indianapolis Colts. If you ever needed proof that the end times are near, all you had to do was watch the Jets football game this past weekend against the Denver Broncos. The Jets ran for 318 yards on the ground, 219 of which came from Isaiah Crowell. And yes, I'm not stumbling, I'm not mixed up. Isaiah Crowell ran for 15 carries, 219 yards, and a touchdown. Bilal Powell added another 99 yards on the ground. And all of a sudden, the Jets look like the greatest running team in history. Now, is this something we can count on week to week? Absolutely not. But now this is 3 games for Isaiah Crowell where he's put up over 18 plus points in PPR leagues. And I guess it's something we really need to start paying attention to. The guy has a super low floor. As you saw in week 4 against the Jaguars, he had 4 carries for 0 yards and 1 fantasy point. However, with this huge week that he just had against the Denver Broncos, he's also capable of getting 219 yards and a touchdown. Now, yes, a big chunk of this came off of 2 huge runs, kind of set him up for an absolutely huge day. But you see where the ceiling is at also. It's a risk every single week. He's got a great matchup against the Indianapolis Colts, who are right now the 24th ranked team against opposing running backs, allowing 26.6 points per week to opposing running backs. He's definitely somebody who I'm going to start this week as a flex play. He has that risk every single week. He could go out there and not be utilized at all. But Bilal Powell's kind of the safer bet. Bilal Powell is somebody who I'm okay with starting almost on a weekly basis, especially in PPR leagues, as a flex play. But the way they're producing in this offense, Sam Darnold looked good, a couple long touchdown passes to Robbie Anderson, that opens up the running game. If they can continue to throw the ball down the field, Crowell and Powell are going to get a lot more opportunities underneath, and I love the upside for both of them, especially this week in a good matchup against Indianapolis, and I'm going to start both Isaiah Crowell and Bilal Powell as flex plays. Cardinals at Vikings are next, and all you David Johnson owners can release sphincter a little bit because the guy had a decent fantasy football game. He had 20 points in PPR leagues, 55 yards on the ground, 2 touchdowns, and he's trending upward. The past 3 games for David Johnson in PPR leagues, he's scored 16, 18, and 20 points per game. There's not a whole lot of offense in this Arizona Cardinals team. Right now, Larry Fitzgerald is banged up. Christian Kirk had a long touchdown reception, which is good to see, and I can expect a little bit more of that going forward. Josh Rosen is improving every week, but this is still not an elite offensive line, and David Johnson is going to struggle getting big numbers on the ground. He needs to live through the air, which he's still not really. This past week, only 2 catches for 16 yards, but I do expect that to tick up here in the coming weeks. At least the usage is coming up. That's all we can ask for. I mean, he's got to touch the ball to get you the points. He wasn't touching it early on, and we were all starting to get a little bit worried. He should be fine going forward. It looks like they're going to, get him back into the game plan more and more each week. Now, they do have a tough matchup this week on the road in Minnesota. And I know Minnesota doesn't really have that team that we all thought we were going to be fearing here on the defensive side of the football. However, as far as going against the run, they've been pretty dang good. They have yet to allow a 100-yard rusher, and they have yet to allow a rushing touchdown on the ground. They held Todd Gurley 17 carries, 83 yards. This is a decent run defense in Minnesota. I expect them to start to turn things around there also. They did not get off to the start they wanted to there, and that defense looked energized against Philadelphia this past week, and I expect them to take a small step forward. That's tough luck for the Cardinals. I'm still starting David Johnson just because we see the usage coming along, though, and hopefully he can continue this trend upward. On the Vikings side of the football, we still have some question marks. Dalvin Cook, will he play? Will he be limited? Is he good to go? We don't know yet. Latavius Murray has underwhelmed, to say the least, in Dalvin Cook's absence. But regardless of who starts in this game, I'm going to start them against the Arizona Cardinals. And that's regardless if it's Cook or Murray. The Cardinals are by far the worst run defense in football. They're allowing, on average, 36.0 points per game to opposing running backs. They have given up over 100 yards rushing in every single game this year, with the exception of Week 2 against the Rams. But Todd Gurley still had 3 touchdowns on the ground. They've given up a total of 7 rushing touchdowns so far through 5 games. This is not a defense that is going to stop the run consistently. The Minnesota offense, going through Thielen and Diggs, is going to open the run game up for both Cook and Murray, depending on who's back there. And I'm starting either one of these guys this week against a very weak Arizona Cardinals run defense. Steelers at Bengals are next, and we're going to start off with James Conner and the Pittsburgh Steelers. James Conner had what you would call a bit of a ball game in Week 5, had a huge week, had 25 total touches, including 21 carries for 110 yards, 2 touchdowns on the ground, another 4 catches for 75 yards through the air, and I expect to see a little bit more of the same this week against the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals were absolutely torched on the grounds by the likes of Christian McCaffrey. Kenyon Drake, who has struggled all year, had a great week last week against the Bengals. The Bengals give up on average 25.4 points per game, and James Conner is really only the only back in this offense, really not sharing with a whole lot of people. Yep, there's rumors that Le'Veon Bell is coming back after the bye week, but I don't care about after the bye week. I'm trying to win right now in Week 6, and James Conner is in my starting lineup. He's a definite must-start for me this week against the Bengals. On the Bengals side of the football, you have Joe Mixon, and there's a lot of people worried with Joe Mixon coming back from a knee procedure. How is he going to react after that procedure? Is he 100%? Gio Bernard's out. Does he get the full workload? There was a lot of questions surrounding Joe Mixon last week, and what did he do? He came out with 25 total touches, including 22 on the ground for 93 yards, another 3 catches, 22 yards, and a touchdown through the air, and looked absolutely fine, looked explosive, was able to cut just fine, made a nice touchdown grab there by the goal line. The guy is legit. You don't want to sit Joe Mixon. This week, he does have a tougher matchup. The Pittsburgh Steelers defense kind of gets made fun of a lot, but it's more on the passing side of the football. Their run defense is solid. They're the 4th ranked run defense against opposing running backs, only giving up 14.6 points per game. They've only allowed 2 rushing touchdowns on the year. One was a goal line carry to Ito Smith last week. The other one was back in Week 1 to Carlos Hyde. They held Kareem Hunt 19 carries, 78 yards. This isn't a bad run defense in Pittsburgh, but Joe Mixon looks like he may be one of the only options again in this backfield. Gio Bernard more than likely out. Mark Walton, somebody who's not going to be too highly involved other than to allow Mixon to go get a quick drink of water, and back in the game he goes. I'm starting Joe Mixon this week, and probably for the coming weeks, I can't see any reason why we'd be sitting Joe Mixon. One of the games I'm looking forward to the most this week is the Los Angeles Chargers at the Cleveland Browns. We'll start off with the Chargers, talking about Melvin Gordon and Austin Eckler. Not a whole lot you can say bad about either one of these guys. This is the 2018 version of last year's Kamara and Ingram. They can coexist with each other. There's enough, of them in the game plan that they can both be productive on a weekly basis. Obviously, Austin Eckler is going to be a little bit more productive through the passing game in PPR leagues. However, last week he only had 1 catch, but it was for 44 yards and a touchdown, so he made it count. He's got 3 receiving touchdowns here on the season so far. Melvin Gordon is the number 3 fantasy running back right now, and you're obviously not going to sit him. He has 6 total touchdowns already on the year. He's averaging 24.6 points per game. And the Cleveland Browns' run defense is not quite as strong as the passing defense. They're currently the 19th ranked defense against opposing running backs, giving up on average 24 points per game. They've allowed a 100-yard rusher in 3 out of 5 weeks so far. And both of these guys, to me, are must-starts this week. Whether you have Austin Eckler or Melvin Gordon, either one of them, they're going to be in my lineup here for Week 6. For the Browns side of the football, we're only going to talk about Carlos Hyde. Really, he's the main guy getting touches in this offense from the backfield. We thought there may be a chance that Nick Chubb starts to eat into this production, but as you saw here in Week 5, it really wasn't. He only had 3 carries for 2 yards coming off his big Week 4 game. Carlos Hyde is the guy to own in the backfield. Right now, he's second in touches to only Todd Gurley. He had 17 carries for 63 yards on the ground. Not huge. It was his first game without a touchdown this year. So 4 out of 5 games, he's scored a touchdown. And now he gets to go up against the Los Angeles Chargers, who aren't bad against the run. They're the 11th ranked run defense. who are giving up on average 20 points per game to opposing running backs. Being that they don't include a whole lot of running backs in the offense here in Cleveland, Duke Johnson was somewhat more involved this past week. He had 5 carries for 35 yards, another 1 catch for 7. So he's not going to eat into too big of a chunk of Carlos Hyde's work. And Carlos Hyde's going to be somebody that I pretty much start on a weekly basis just for his touchdown upside alone. So this week at home against the Los Angeles Chargers, I'm going to start Carlos Hyde. Bills at Texans are next, so we'll start off with Shady McCoy and Chris Ivory for the Buffalo Bills. Neither one of these guys I'm overly high on. What I do like what I saw this past week, they gave Shady 24 carries, only got 85 yards, wasn't heavily involved in the passing game, only 2 catches for 23 yards. I would like to see that number tick up a little bit to help everybody out in the PPR section, but Chris Ivory's still involved. He had 14 carries for 43 yards. These guys are going to continue to eat into each other's touches, and this is not an offense that gets a whole lot of goal line opportunities. If the touchdowns aren't there, you're not going to be getting a whole lot of production from either one of these guys. They do have somewhat of a tough matchup this week, 15th ranked run defense as far as opposing fantasy points go to running backs in the Houston Texans. They give up on average 22.8 points per game. However, this past week they held Zeke to right around 50 yards, only like 2.7 yards per carry. It's an improved defensive front there, and they're playing well against the run right now. The bigger games they gave up were right there at the beginning of the season. So this is a very much improved run defense in Houston, and I don't expect a whole lot from either one of these guys, McCoy or Ivory. They're both sits for me here in Week 6. On the Texans side of the football, you have Lamar Miller and Alfred Blue that we'll be talking about. And really, I don't want anything to do with these guys either this week. Yes, it sounds like Lamar Miller is coming back. But how much did Alfred Blue's performance this past week lead to a limited workflow for Miller going forward? Listen, Alfred Blue didn't go out and blow the doors off of anything. But what really stands out to me is he had 28 touches in Week 5. That's more than Lamar Miller has gotten at any point this season in this offense. Now, Blue didn't do a whole lot with it. Only 46 yards on 20 carries, but added in 8 receptions for 73 yards, which really helped people out in PPR leagues. Miller, coming back off the injury, hasn't produced hardly anything this year at all. Best game of the season was Week 1 against New England, where he had 20 carries for 98 yards, only 11 fantasy points, no rushing touchdowns yet on the year. The Buffalo Bills are the 20th ranked run defense. They're allowing 24.6 points to opposing running backs, which isn't bad. However, I'm not taking the chance this week with this offense in Houston. If they get more of a split, the production is going to be hit or miss for either one of these guys. Donta Foreman is going to start getting back into the mix here in the future. What happens going forward with the Houston Texans backfield? I don't think they're overly committed to Lamar Miller. Alfred Blue could be used a little bit more, and it's just going to be a wash. They're going to kind of cancel each other out. I'm not starting either one of these guys this week. Bears versus Dolphins are next. We'll start off with the Bears, Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen. Jordan Howard's been somewhat frustrating for fantasy owners so far, but he's coming off the bye week. But in Week 4, he had 11 carries for 25 yards, and it kind of left a sour taste in people's mouth, especially when you go look at Tariq Cohen's last game before the bye week, where he had 13 carries for 53 yards, and also he added through the passing game another 7 catches, 121 yards, and a touchdown, and kind of overshadowed Jordan Howard, and it worried a lot of owners. A lot of owners jumped off the bandwagon. They said, why is Tariq Cohen out touching Jordan Howard on a weekly basis? What is going on here? And there's reason for concern. But this week, they get a great matchup against the Miami Dolphins defense right now that is currently 29th as far as points go to opposing running backs, on average giving up 30 points per game, which is 7.5 points over the league average. They've allowed a 100-yard rusher in 3 out of 5 weeks. Joe Mixon looked great against the Bengals last week. The week before that, the Patriots ran all over them. They gave up 167 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns in Week 4. This is a Dolphins defense that's struggling to stop the run. Now, Tariq Cohen, in my opinion, as long as Anthony Miller is out, which he'll be out this week, Tariq Cohen gets a huge bump in value. Him and Taylor Gabriel also. I mean, they're both going to be more productive out of the passing game than the running game. But if they can get that short, intermediate passing game going, it's going to open up the game for the likes of Jordan Howard later in the game. I do expect him to get more touches as the season goes on. As the weather gets colder, they're going to run the ball more in Chicago. I'm not totally sold on Mitch Magic yet. Kind of like Fitzmagic. The same thing's going to happen with Mitch Magic. Eventually, the magic will run out. However, in the time being right now, these short, intermediate passes with the playmakers of Tariq Cohen, Taylor Gabriel, I really like this offense going forward for the next few weeks. They got some good matchups. I'm going to start both of these guys this week, Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen against the Miami Dolphins. In our weekly installment of a backfield we can't figure out, let's talk about the Miami Dolphins, Kenyon Drake and Frank Gore. Now, all the Kenyon Drake truthers came back last week. They saw what he did against the Cincinnati Bengals on the road. 6 carries, 46 yards, added another 7 catches for 69 yards and a touchdown. And everybody is ready to rejoice, saying the Kenyon Drake of last year is back. This is what we expected from him. However, Frank Gore came out and had another 12 carries, out-touched him on the ground for 63 yards, averaging over 5 yards a carry, and is still involved in this offense. But that's beside the point. They're going up against the Chicago Bears, whose defense I want absolutely no part of, like at all. The most they've allowed on the ground to opposing running backs this year is 57 yards on 19 carries, which is back in week 2. They only give up, on average, 11 points per game to opposing running backs, which is first best in the NFL. I want no part of the Miami Dolphins backfield this week. The Bears defense is that good. Rams at Broncos are next, and it's Todd Gurley for the Los Angeles Rams. And I don't even know why I have to include him. You're going to start Todd Gurley. The dude is ridiculously crazy. Already has multiple games this year with 3 touchdowns. Only 2 100-yard rushing games, but I don't care. If I have Todd Gurley, I'm starting Todd Gurley. The dude is averaging 27 points a game in PPR leagues. And if you ever thought about benching Todd Gurley, I need to put a 1-800 number up here for you to call because there's something wrong. You never bench Todd Gurley. For the Broncos, talk about Royce Freeman and Phillip Lindsay. Now, to start the season, and this includes myself, we were all aboard the Royce Freeman bandwagon, and I'm really not off the bandwagon. I'm just sitting in one of the back rows right now because the guy is not playing bad. He's averaging over 5 yards a carry. He has touchdowns in 3 out of the last 4 weeks. The issue is not with Royce Freeman. It's with the coaching staff getting the ball to said Royce Freeman. Last week, he only had 5 carries for 31 yards. Phillip Lindsay, on the other hand, is somebody who's gotten 12 touches each of the past 2 weeks and is not only out-touching him on the ground, but he's more involved in the passing game also. This was supposed to be the PPR option in Denver, but now he's getting the bulk of the carries also. He's still being productive, and he's averaging 11 points per game, which is good, but it makes Phillip Lindsay the safer bet at this point because he's seeing more consistent volume on a week-to-week basis. Now, they do have a somewhat difficult matchup. I said it's against the Rams, and a lot of you people are saying, well, that's probably one of the most difficult matchups. It's the Rams defense. And I would have said that, but 2 out of the last 3 weeks, they've given up over 100 yards rushing and a touchdown on the ground. Last week, they were torched by Chris Carson and Mike Davis by the Seattle Seahawks for 184 yards rushing. 2 weeks before that, 127 yards on the ground by the Los Angeles Chargers. The Rams defense is starting to look a little bit vulnerable. They've been getting in a lot more shootouts recently, and their run defense is paying the price for it. I'm not chancing it with Royce Freeman this week, though. I'm going to sit Royce Freeman, but I'm going to start Phillip Lindsay as long as you're in a PPR league. Ravens and Titans are next, and I really don't want any part of this game for either running back on either side, but we'll start off with the Baltimore Ravens. We'll talk about Alex Collins and Uncle Buck Allen. And Alex Collins he's a headache, right? I mean, he has that potential in an offense that could feature him. They're not featuring him. Why? Because he keeps fumbling, and now he's averaging less than 4 yards per carry, which is very disappointing. He has had somewhat of a tough schedule here to start the season. It does get a little bit easier as the season goes along, so I wouldn't drop him or just get rid of him yet. He's somebody you need to keep stashed on your bench. Buck Allen, also somebody he's a little bit more consistent. He's averaging 12 points per game as far as PPR leagues go. He's still involved in the passing game. Last week had 6 receptions for 44 yards to go along with 8 carries and 34 yards. Like I said, he's a little bit safer. I'm not overly high on the matchup this week that they have, though, against the Tennessee Titans. They're currently the 5th-ranked defense as far as fantasy points to running backs go. They give up on average 15.2 points per game. However, the last 2 weeks, they've allowed over 100 yards on the ground. Last week to Buffalo, 128 yards rushing, no touchdowns. Philadelphia the week before that, 109 yards. But the key thing is they haven't allowed a rushing touchdown as of yet, and that does not bode well for the likes of Alex Collins or even Buck Allen if they can get to the goal line. It's a great defense there in Tennessee. They're very underrated, and I'm not touching either one of these guys for the Baltimore Ravens. On the Titans side of the football, you have Dion Lewis and Derrick Henry. Now, we at least thought we could count on Dion Lewis in PPR leagues, but that hasn't quite worked out for us. This past week, he had 12 carries, 34 yards to go along with 3 catches and 14. He's only hit double-digit points twice on the year. He's only got one touchdown on the year, and now he's turned into the same type of inconsistent play that we were dealing with Derrick Henry, who right now has a rushing high for the year of 57 yards on 18 carries. This running game is struggling because Marcus Mariota can't be consistent enough in the passing game to pull the defenders outside of the box. They do have a tough matchup against the Baltimore Ravens, currently the third-ranked run defense against running backs, only giving up 13.2 points per game, only has allowed one rushing touchdown on the year. I'm not buying either one of these guys in Tennessee, and they're both going to be sits for me this week. Jags and Cowboys are next, and really for the Jacksonville Jaguars, the only guy we have left to talk about right now is TJ Yeldon. Doesn't sound like Fournette's going to play. He's doubtful. Corey Grant placed on IR with a foot injury, and now it's basically TJ Yeldon, right? It's his job. There's not a whole lot of competition. It wouldn't surprise me if they brought in a free agent at some point. Who that may be, though, it's still up in the air. The last 2 weeks with TJ Yeldon being the lead back, though, he scored 22 and 25 points in PPR leagues. Not huge numbers on the ground. This past week, 10 carries for 53 yards. So he is averaging over 5 yards a carry, which is a plus, but also added 8 catches, 69 yards, and a touchdown through the air, which is where he's going to get you the bulk of the value. It is somewhat of a tough matchup against the Dallas Cowboys this week, who are the 14th ranked defense against opposing running backs, giving up 21.4 points per game. They've only allowed a 100-yard rusher once. And if Sean Lee isn't playing, that opens things up for opposing running backs. Last week, though, against the Houston Texans, they allowed 20 carries, 46 yards. Not a whole lot on the ground, but some of that is due to the inefficiencies of the Houston run game. I love TJ Yeldon this week. I love TJ Yeldon as long as Leonard Fournette is out, especially in PPR leagues. He can give you some big value, and I am definitely 100% starting TJ Yeldon this week in Week 6. On the Cowboys side of the football, you have Ezekiel Elliott, and obviously if you have him, you're starting him, but a lot of people are kind of pulled off the Zeke bandwagon saying he's having a down year. Well, he's still the number 6 running back in fantasy football, and he's already got 22 receptions on the year. We knew he'd be more involved in the passing game this year, and he really is. This past week against Houston, he had 7 receptions for 30 yards, only had 50 yards on the ground, but still getting that 20 carry mark. Yes, he's going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars. I get it. It's a tough defense, not ideal, but you're not going to sit Ezekiel Elliott. Even though the Jags are the number 6 defense against the run, they've only allowed 2 rushing touchdowns on the year and only allowed 100 yards rushing in a game once, and that was way back in Week 1 off a huge play that was broken by Saquon Barkley. I get it. They're an elite offense or elite defense in Jacksonville, but you're not going to sit Ezekiel Elliott just because of it. Sunday night game, you have the Kansas City Chiefs at the New England Patriots, and I'm going to be completely honest. I'm starting every offensive player in this game. I don't care their position. I expect a lot of offense, a lot of points to be scored this week. But we'll start off on the Kansas City Chiefs side of the football. Kareem Hunt must start for me this week. He's got touchdowns 3 weeks in a row now, 4 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. He's averaging 15 points per game. He's the clear lead back, obviously, there. He's not too overly involved in the passing game, though, which is a little bit surprising. I expected a little bit more from that. He's only had 1 reception for 7 yards last week against the Jacksonville Jaguars. The week before that, only 3 catches, but did have 54 yards on it. He's just not as involved in the passing game, a little bit more reliant on the running game. He's only had 100 yards once so far this year. But this matchup against the New England Patriots, I expect a lot of offense. The Patriots defense isn't as bad against the run as you would think, though. They've only allowed 1 rushing touchdown on the year way back in Week 1. They've allowed over 100 yards rushing 2 out of 5 weeks. Last week, the Indianapolis Colts had 84 rushing yards, and the week before that, only 47 for the Miami Dolphins. This is an improved defense on the Patriots side of the football, and if you can learn one thing about the New England Patriots, if their offense is clicking, the defense takes a step forward. It's just one of those things where they kind of feed off of each other, and you're starting to see it now. The offense is starting to click. The defense is going to get improved. They do it almost every single year. I'm still starting Kareem Hunt, though. I expect a lot of points, a lot of yards, and a lot of excitement in this game. On the Patriots side of the ball, I said it. I'm starting all the offensive weapons in this game, and that goes for Sony Michel and James White also. Sony Michel has taken over that clear lead role. The past 2 weeks, 2 weeks ago, Week 4, he had 25 carries, 112 yards, and a touchdown. This past week against Indianapolis, 18 carries, 98 yards, and a touchdown. Not overly involved in the passing game, but he doesn't really need to be. If they can involve him on the ground, get him the goal line work, get him the touchdowns, it's no different than LeGarrette Blount a few years ago. He may not go out there and put up huge rushing numbers, but if he's got the touchdown upside in that offense, it's definitely a piece you want to have in your lineup. James White, on the other hand, has been an absolute surprise. Right now in PPR leagues, he's the number 7 running back, and a lot of you guys probably picked him up off of waivers. The past 2 weeks, he's got 53 fantasy points in PPR leagues. Not a whole lot on the ground, though. I mean, his game last week against the Colts, 2 carries for 0 yards. If you see that, you're like, not overly interested. However, he had 10 receptions, 77 yards, and a touchdown. He has a receiving touchdown in 4 out of the 5 games so far this year. Another one on the ground back in week 4. This is somebody who's heavily involved. One of the favorite targets of Tom Brady going forward. Tom Brady wanted this guy more involved. He's getting him more involved, and James White has been producing with it. I don't expect that to change. The Chiefs are one of the worst defenses against opposing running backs, 31st in the league, giving up on average 33 points per game to opposing running backs, giving up 4 touchdowns in the last 5 weeks. I'm definitely 100% starting Sony Michel and James White this week in all leagues. 49ers and Packers are next, and this is kind of a game that could have been, right? This could have been a great game had Jimmy G been turning around and handing the ball off to Jerick McKinnon, or maybe throwing it to a healthy Marquise Goodwin. But instead we get C.J. Beathard turning around and handing it off to Alfred Morris or Kyle Juszczyk. Yeah, it just doesn't have that same ring to it. But Breida's doubtful. With the ankle injury, it doesn't sound like he's going to be playing on Monday Night Football. It sounds like Alfred Morris is going to get the bulk of the work. This past week against the Cardinals, one of the worst teams in football as far as defending the run. Gave up 18 carries for 61 yards, which is nothing great, but he is going to see the bulk of the work going forward. It is a tough matchup against the Green Bay defense, which is currently 9th against opposing running backs, giving up 19 points a week. However, if they're giving up 19 points a week, if Alfred Morris can break into the double digits somewhere in that 10 to 12 mark, I think you're somewhat happy with that. He's a flex play at best, just based off of the volume that he's going to see. But Kyle Juszczyk is somebody who, deep leagues, I'm talking anything larger than 12 teams, I wouldn't trust him in anything smaller than that as a flex play, PPR play. He's somebody that could be a little bit more involved in that passing game until Breida is healthy. This past week, he did have 6 catches for 75 yards. So it's something you need to pay attention to in the interim. If you're really, really struggling, looking for a flex play, Kyle Juszczyk as a flex play in PPR leagues only would be my only recommendation. On the Packers side of the football, you got Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams still, and a lot of people are mad with Aaron Jones, but don't be mad with Aaron Jones. He's just not being used enough. The guy is still averaging over 6 yards a carry, almost 10 yards a reception. The guy is doing what he needs to do. He's just not getting the ball enough. This could be his week, though. I like the matchup with the San Francisco 49ers. They're the 24th ranked defense against opposing running backs, giving up 26 points per game. Jamal Williams, I don't want to call him an afterthought because he's still going to be involved in a handful of plays, somewhere right in that 5 to 8 range he should see every single week. This is going to be Aaron Jones' backfield moving forward. Be patient with it. Don't give up on it. Don't trade Aaron Jones just yet. He's going to start producing. He's producing now. He just needs the workload. Remember, he was off the first 2 weeks of the season. They're getting him back into the game plan, working him back into the scheme of things. He's somebody that is going to have a great week. I'm looking forward to start this week. He may not have a huge game, but he's a start for me here in week 6. But after the bye week going forward, Aaron Jones could be somebody who's heavily involved that we really need to pay attention to. But for this week, though, I'm going to start Aaron Jones and sit Jamal Williams. All right, those were all the running back matchups here for week 6. Hopefully, I was able to touch some players that you have on your rosters. If I didn't touch somebody you have on your rosters, you have very deep rosters because I went pretty deep here. But if you have more questions, hit them up down below. A huge community, over 23,000 people here almost, willing to help out and help you make these decisions. Sometimes you just need that added, reassurance to somebody come to you and say, yeah, man, I would do the same thing. That's kind of what this community is all about. We're here to help each other out. It's not just me telling everybody what to do. I don't roll that way. But hey, hopefully you guys have a good rest of your week. Really appreciate the support. Make sure you guys are liking and subscribing to the channel if you enjoyed it. And look forward for some of the other start-sit videos coming up here in the week. And I really appreciate you once again. Have a good one. Thanks. Bye.